and then we'll get it rolling. I think I finally got all this technology stuff figured out. You got to see my new setup, man. It's pretty decent.
Yeah.
All right, guys, welcome back to the 92 Mesh Group channel, your home on YouTube for the Air Raid offense. And I got a great special guest with me tonight, Brad Crawford, senior SEC analyst, whatever. I don't even know what all the titles are with 24/7 Sports, but him and I go way back, and he's doing big things. And if anybody knows the SEC, Brad does. He's been on all the national radio shows and has a million views on columns and all that good stuff. And so, Brad, answer the question everybody wants to know, man. The Pirate has brought the air raid offense back to the SEC. What can we expect?
That's quite a splash, man. I think Mississippi State, this didn't come about just in the last 72 hours or so. They made a point that when they fired Joe Moorhead after 2 seasons, 2 wins over Ole Miss, too, I might add, they saw a big fish out there, took the opportunity and got Mike Leach. They flew down to Key West, were able to lure him to Starkville. And I tell you what, man, one day into the job, and he has turned social media on fire.
Yeah, Twitter's going crazy. I mean, me and all my boys are, we're kind of playing with it. We're all taking pictures of the map app on how far it's going to take to get there. I think it's a 9-hour drive for me, but we're all like, and I even was playing around today, say, hey, we need to do a live podcast at the Mississippi State Coaches Clinic. It'll be Air Raid Nation 1.0, and then we'll do our clinic. It may be Air Raid Nation 2.0, but it's not something new to the SEC because obviously, Hal Mummy and those guys were doing this at Kentucky. They beat Alabama with the air raid. I mean, Now, was it so new back then that was the difference? And now, I mean, because every team in the SEC has some air raid concepts to it. I mean, we were talking about LSU a little bit before we came on air, and everybody's gonna throw the shallows and everybody runs mesh and things like that. But the true air raid philosophy, I mean, it doesn't get any more pure than Mike Leach. And everybody thought he was going to stay at Washington State. He had just signed an extension. And every time Tennessee has a job opening, I'm all over it. And, we've been talking about this for years, and now it's going to happen. And do you think this is purely a answer to Lane Kiffin going to Mississippi and trying to raise their brand nationally, bringing in Mike Leach?
I think it's part of that. Anytime you're an athletic director or one of the power brass at an SEC program, you've got to make a splashy hire to keep the fan base interested. I think that's what Mississippi State did, bringing in Mike Leach. Like you said, man, we have, seen sort of a philosophical switch in the SEC West specifically. LSU bringing in Joe Brady from the New Orleans Saints sort of changed the game, so to speak, this season with, Joe Burrow having quite the year he had. And, it's not just Joe Burrow. LSU had the best offensive line in the SEC, arguably the best wide receiver core behind Alabama. I think it'll be interesting, though, to see if Mike Leach can recruit the level of athlete that it takes to not only run the air raid, because he's shown he can do that with success, but, can he beat these Auburns and LSUs and Alabamas regularly? Because that's ultimately what he's going to be, graded on at Mississippi State. I think at Washington State, every now and then he would beat a top 25 team. He did have that 11-2 season 2 years ago, and he was able to find, diamonds in the rough at quarterback that really fit his system. In the SEC, you're not going to find those diamonds. You've got to go after the 4- and 5-star guys. So, I'm very amped to see if Mike Leach can recruit at a level it takes to win in not just the SEC, but the SEC West, the toughest division in college football.
Yeah, no doubt. And you and I were kind of bantering back and forth about that on text message about, you said something about his number 1 recruiting class was like 50th in the nation or something like that. And I just kind of retorted. I was like, yeah, but that's to a school with no sunshine and chicks in sweaters. How's he going to do at Mississippi State? I mean, we saw, I think he recruited fairly well at Texas Tech, being not the place that you wanted to go to in that conference with, with Texas and Oklahoma and all those guys. And so now is Mississippi State the Texas Tech of the SEC?
I think a big part of this staff that he's going to hire is who he's going to get as the defensive coordinator. Sometimes when you run the air raid, you're going to have 3 and outs. and possessions that take 45 seconds. In the SEC, when you put your 11 on defense back on the field after less than a minute, they're gassed, and they're probably going to face a damn good offense on the other side of the ball. So, not only is, him implementing his system in year one important, which, he's going to be able to do here in spring practice here in a couple of weeks when they open up in Starkville, but, who is he going to hire on defense? Can he recruit dogs on that side of the ball that it takes? Because at Texas Tech and Washington State, the one thing he was always missing was, very good elite level defenses. That's pretty much what you need. You look at Dan Mulling's success at Mississippi State. He got Mississippi State all the way to number 1 in 2014, which, is totally unheard of at that program. Don't know if Mike Leach is going to get to that level, but if he does, I think the defensive side of the ball will be part of it as well, because he's going to put so much stress on that unit.
Yeah, and there's a connection to Mississippi State with Mike Leach, with Joe Lee Dunn, who was at Mississippi State for years as the defensive coordinator, worked for Hal Mummy at Belhaven, and they're all pretty tight. I saw some stuff on Football Scoop. They were talking about that may be one of the reasons why Rocky Long resigned at San Diego State, that he may be Leach's hire as D coordinator. And that's going to be interesting. I mean, but obviously being in Mississippi, you have all the Mississippi JUCOs. You're not very far from Memphis. You're not very far from New Orleans. You're not very far from Houston area. So it's not like he can't go out and get those guys. If I'm a defensive guy, I mean, I kind of want to play in an air raid offense because, number one, I'm going to get more snaps to show the NFL that I can play.
Yeah.
Number two, I don't have to worry about if I hold somebody to 14 points a game because they're probably going to score 30. So there's some plus sides to being a defensive cat, I think, in an air raid offense. But it's going to be interesting, and I know it's really exciting. Everybody is in. There's a couple of guys in the chat right now talking about the same thing that you were saying. Who's he going to get to fill out his defense and those kind of things. But I haven't seen anything, but I'm sure Mississippi State gave him quite the package to hire a staff.
Yeah, he's got he's getting paid $5 million per year on a 4-year deal, which is kind of the mandate in Mississippi, and they're giving him a $4.7 million pool for his 10 assistant coaches. So you're talking about probably 1.5 to 1.75 mil for that defensive coordinator, because we know Mike's going to call the plays. So he's going to be able to get a quality DC with that kind of salary range. And really, he can probably hire a guy who's already employed somewhere else. I don't think he has to go the route of, find a guy who needs a job right now. He can pretty much handpick who he wants from a major Power 5 program.
Well, I mean, and it's like when he had Grinch with him, Grinch obviously left him after having a couple of good years. He goes to Ohio State, and then now he's at Oklahoma. Those guys, I think he can pay what anybody in the country probably can pay outside of maybe a handful of people for a defensive coordinator, you think?
You're going to have to be a little bit different, too, on defense. I think, what Mike was able to do in his best season at Washington State under Grinch, when Grinch won National Assistant Coach of the Year, you notice they brought a lot of pressure. They blitzed a lot. At Mississippi State, this is not going to be a line up and we can beat LSU and Alabama. It has never worked that way in Starkville. It's not going to work now because those two programs are always going to have the high 4-5-star defensive line, offensive line talent. I think for Leach, he's going to have to find guys who, like you said, are willing to play maybe 70, 75 snaps a game on defense, not a whole lot of subbing. So, he has to have a philosophy that not only attacks opposing offenses, but, is turnover heavy. You look at Baylor this season, man, they led the nation in takeaways. And that's something that was a sticking point for Matt Rule and that staff. And I think you'll see Mike Leach kind of go in that same direction defensively.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know where Mississippi State's recruiting class was prior to the bowl game and what they did at the at the early signing period. I know that I don't even know how many guys he can bring in between now and February because, now all of a sudden, I think this is the result of the Mike Leach hire. Now everybody kind of #cares.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of going the JUCO route. I think in year one, a lot of coaches, not necessarily group of, Power 5 coaches, but some group of 5 guys. Mike Norvell, who used to be at Memphis, now at Florida State, he really tapped the JUCO transfer route early and often during his career there, and it paid off. So Mike might be a guy who, kind of goes that route and tries to find instant starters. You got to remember too, man, a few of his former, quality Washington State quarterbacks were former walk-ons. So, I mean, he knows how to find talent.
Well, and I was just wondering, this is what I was going to ask you, because you know a lot better than I do, because this is kind of your business, but I'm wondering if there isn't a quarterback out there in the transfer portal right now that he might want to go after to bring in.
There's quite a few, man. Wake Forest quarterback Jamie Newman, he's probably –
that kid is a stud. I know his high school coach really well, and we went to a couple of camps together when he was being recruited.
So Georgia's the team that really wants him right now. So if, Georgia pretty much has him hook, line, and sinker, I think he's going to announce sometime this weekend. Georgia's probably the program he's going to sign with. But you look at KJ Costello, former Stanford quarterback. I think he has 45 career touchdown passes. He'd be a good fit. I mean, there's 4 or 5 Power 5 quarterbacks right now that, could be day one starters at Mississippi State. And I know Mike, he hadn't really looked at his roster yet and see what works, but they got a guy coming back in Garrett Schrader who's pretty dang good too, and he'll only be a sophomore. So he's a guy who they might be able to kind of, push into an air raid system.
Well, and I will tell you this, and this is what Coach Mummy and I were talking about last spring. We were sitting up there at one of the clinics we were both speaking at, and he was watching the NFL draft, and we got to talking about Jalen Hurts. And he was talking about how everybody said Jalen couldn't do this and Jalen couldn't do that. And he said, watch what happens when Jalen goes to Oklahoma and he gets in the air raid, which is a rep-based offense where he only has to learn a very few limited number of plays, and then he's able to display his athletic ability. So I think by looking at those quarterbacks, whether it be the young kid that's on the roster now or those Power 5 guys, you look at the Jalen Hurts model, a guy who comes from a pro-style offense, and then all of a sudden you throw him into an air raid. And then he's going to have a chance, I think, to put up not only big numbers, but the learning curve is not going to be as hard.
And I mean, credit to Lincoln Riley, man, for sort of, transforming this pass-heavy air raid at OU to a little more balanced spread this year. Jalen Hurts, I think, ran it 200 times, had over 1,100 yards rushing. That's not a knock on his passing ability, but Lincoln knew that he wasn't the passer Baker Mayfield wasn't the passer Kyler Murray was, and he kind of catered to Jalen's strengths. I think really the only time you saw Jalen struggle this season is when Oklahoma could not block LSU, in that Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl playoff semifinal game. In an air raid offense, which is very key for all air raid coaches, it's not an offense where you can fall behind early in the game and then throw every down. You've got to have balance. I know Mike does a good job of basically, slip screens and halfback screens. Those kind of plays are Mike's running plays.
And for him and for most of us, when we talk about balance, we don't talk about balance in yardage. We talk about balance in touches.
Yep.
So, we want to make sure that the ball's being spread around to different guys and doing different things. And that's really, really important in the air raid. And I'm intrigued. I would have thought that Leach would have held out for the South Carolina type gig a little bit more, anything in the SEC East. But he's definitely done that pirate thing. He's like, yo, the booty is here, and that's where I'm going.
He got in the meat grinder, man. SEC West. I mean, top to bottom. You look at Arkansas. They finished 2-10 last year, but they just hired one of the best recruiters in the country in Sam Pittman.
Yeah.
And then, you've already mentioned Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. So the SEC West, from Saban to Gus Malzahn to Ed Orgeron at LSU, I mean, that is a top flight coach division. I think everybody would agree that the SEC East is the more winnable division right now, with really Georgia and Florida the only 2 elite teams there. So, Mike has his work cut out for him, and, kudos to him for not being afraid to take a really big job at Mississippi State, a job that's hard to win at too.
Yeah, I mean, because, he had just signed an extension in Washington State, and, he's going to have more 9-win seasons there than he didn't. Sure. I mean, just because of, what he's able to do and those kind of things. But I think he really wanted a challenge, and I think he kind of had a chip on his shoulder too, wanting to prove something. So answer the question. Does Mississippi State give up 50 to Alabama this year?
Not with Mac Jones at quarterback, if that's the guy for Alabama. It'll be very interesting to see just what kind of team Alabama has this year. You know, Mac Jones, he is the junior replacement for Tua Tagovailoa after he declared for the draft. They got 5-star Bryce Young coming in from California, who a lot of analysts think he's going to win the job over the veteran during spring practice. So I'm not sure year one for Mike Leach is going to be too kind in Starkville. I do think they'll make a bowl game this season. There's, 4 winnable non-conference games. All you got to do is get to 6 wins now in college football, man, to get a bowl.
Yeah.
There's 41 bowl games. So I think 6-6 right now is probably the floor for Mike Leach.
So you're saying 500 or bust, huh?
In year one, yeah.
How long is it going to be before people are not drinking the air raid Kool-Aid? I mean, what's got to happen to him at Mississippi State for that to happen?
I tell you what, man, a lot of folks right now love this hire, I think mainly because of what LSU was able to do this season with a legitimate air raid offense. And right now in Starkville, Mike does not have a quarterback the caliber of Joe Burrow. Heck, nobody in college football does right now. Maybe
that dude was putting up NCAA 14 numbers. It was like a video game.
He was shredding tight windows. And you look at the receivers he's got, man, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Those are 2 4- and 5-star guys. So Mississippi State does have some freak athletes. Got a very good strength program there in Starkville, very underrated. So he's got to find a quarterback who's not only fearless playing the SEC, but has to have a guy who can bounce back from mistakes and get right on out there. I don't know how much Washington State football you watched this year, but Anthony Gordon, very underrated, very good player.
Yeah. Well, hey, so I'm gonna put you on the spot because we're boys, and you got a free access ticket to the SEC Media Day. Yeah. What's your first question for Mike Leach?
Man, that's hard. That's really tough. Probably something off the wall just to hear Mike talk for 28 minutes on, what is a Crimson Tide, or why is Alabama's mascot an elephant? I mean, that would go viral.
Yeah. Well, the first time I ever had a conversation with him, and really the only time I had a conversation outside of a coaching clinic with him, but we were sitting down there and all he was telling me was about a trip he went on with the Travel Channel. They sent him to New Zealand and he was so excited that he got to meet the coach of the All Blacks, the rugby team. And he was, I'm telling you, the dude is so smart that he can sit in a room with 5 people and make each one of you think like he's having a conversation with you solely. So, if anything, he's going to make your job fun, I would think.
Yeah, and he's going to be cutting edge in the SEC too, man. A lot of coaches look at Kirby Smart. Everybody bashes him because he's still pro style, can't move the ball against good teams. Mike ain't gonna have that problem. Mike will, change it up on the run like he always has. So I think he's a great personality. Lane Kiffin as well. So the SEC certainly media days in July is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet so. Well, listen, Brad, I really appreciate you coming on. Hey, listen, you guys check out Brad. He's on 247sports.com. He writes for college football and he started off as a local Robinson County football reporter. And you want to talk about making it big. Brad does it, and he's a grinder, and just really, really excited for him and the things that he's been able to do in his career. And so you guys check him out on 247sports.com. He does a lot of different types of things. If you got some sneakers and you're a sneakerhead, hit him up. He knows sneakers probably better than anybody I know. He can tell me all kind of stuff about that stuff. And Brad, where else can they find you? What's your Twitter handle and all that good stuff?
Yeah, B Crawford 247. I tweet a couple times a day. I'm one of the SEC insiders on our national desk at 247 Sports, CBS Sports 2. I'm on Feinbaum every now and then, and I've got a sneaker podcast now as well. First in Line on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your podcast. All
right. Hey, and he's got mad crazy beard game too. And so if you're a beard game guy, check out Brad on that deal. Well, listen, Brad, I really appreciate you coming on the channel, man. This was kind of last minute, but I just couldn't pass up the chance to talk about the Pirate bringing the air raid back to the SEC. It's what everybody's talking about, and I'm just glad that you were able to come on. Yeah, that thing is sweet, man. That beard is it's something special, man. I can't even mess with you with that deal. There's a little delay on the YouTube video, so I'm seeing it now in my face. But like I said, man, I really can't say enough about you. Appreciate it. Guys, if you're going to be at AFCA this weekend, I'm getting in there tomorrow night. So hit me up on Twitter, man. Let's get together and hang out and talk a little air raid. And as always, spin it to win.